The rain poured relentlessly that night, soaking everything it touched. In the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, a small, shivering figure stood out against the darkness, a dog chained tightly to a rusty pole. His fur was matted, clinging to his frail body as the cold rain streamed down his face. His eyes, wide and glistening, seemed to plead silently with anyone who might pass by. But the street was empty, the world around him eerily quiet, save for the sound of rain hitting the ground. Who had left him there? How long had he endured this loneliness and pain? The chain was wrapped so tightly around the pole that even a small movement seemed impossible. He didn't bark or whine. It was as if he had resigned himself to this cruel fate. Each droplet of rain that fell on him seemed to carry the weight of his despair. But in this seemingly hopeless moment, something remarkable was about to happen. A passerby, shielded by a bright red umbrella, stopped suddenly, their eyes locking onto the trembling figure. This chance encounter would change everything for the dog, and for the person whose life would be touched by his silent plea for help. Little did anyone know, this rain-soaked night would mark the beginning of a story of resilience, compassion, and a bond that would inspire countless others. The rain didn't let up, growing colder and heavier as the hours passed. The dog, too weak to stand for long, sank to the muddy ground. His chain, once a dull silver, was now brown with rust, digging into the skin of his neck each time he shifted. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, a constant, unbearable ache. His body was trembling, not just from the cold, but from sheer exhaustion. He hadn't eaten in days, maybe longer. Every sound around him seemed to amplify his fear. The distant rumble of thunder echoed like a warning, while the occasional splash of a passing car felt like a cruel reminder of how close, yet far, help truly was. The dog's eyes, wide and sunken, scanned the road ahead, praying for someone to notice. But no one came. For the person who finally did stop, the struggle was just beginning. As the stranger approached, they hesitated, uncertain of what to do. The dog's fragile state was heartbreaking, but it was his eyes, those deep, pleading eyes, that held them frozen in place. What kind of life had this poor soul endured? Who could be so cruel as to leave him here, abandoned and broken? The rescuer crouched down, keeping their voice low and soothing, trying to win the dog's trust. But the dog didn't move. His body flinched at every raindrop, and his breathing was shallow. It was clear he had been let down by humans before. The chain that tethered him to the pole seemed less like an object and more like a symbol of his helplessness, a reminder of all the pain he'd endured. With shaking hands, the rescuer reached out, only to realize the chain wasn't just wrapped, it was padlocked. Panic surged. How could they free him without the key? They searched desperately through their belongings, finding nothing but a small pair of scissors, a tool far too weak to break the rusted links. Time felt like it was slipping away. The dog needed shelter, warmth, and medical care, but the rain showed no mercy. Every passing car added another layer of urgency. Would someone call the authorities before the rescuer could act? Would the dog survive another hour in these conditions? As the rescuer scrambled for a solution, the dog's quiet resilience was a heartbreaking sight. He didn't fight or resist, he simply waited, as if he had no hope left to cling to. Yet, in his stillness, there was a flicker of trust, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this person was different. Finally, the rescuer spotted a jagged piece of metal, nearby perhaps a discarded shard from a broken sign. With trembling fingers, they picked it up and began to work on the chain, their hands freezing in the rain. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, each sound of metal scraping against metal, echoing in the silent street. The dog's body was completely still now, his eyes half closed. Was he giving up? The rescuer whispered softly, promising him freedom, warmth, and safety. "Hold on, buddy. Just a little longer." Finally, with a loud snap, the chain gave way. The rescuer gasped in relief, their hands shaking as they pulled the dog gently into their arms. He was lighter than expected, his bones prominent beneath his drenched fur. His body didn't resist, he simply collapsed into their embrace, too weak to move but grateful in his own quiet way. The journey wasn't over. The rescuer hurried to their car, placing the dog on a soft blanket they had grabbed in a rush. The warmth of the car's heater was a stark contrast to the bitter cold outside, and the dog slowly began to relax, his trembling subsiding slightly. But the real challenge loomed ahead. Would he survive the night? The rescuer's mind raced with questions. Was he sick? How long had he gone without food or water? And most of all, how could they show this innocent soul that life could be different, better than what he had endured? The car ride felt endless, filled with quiet prayers and glances at the fragile creature curled up on the seat. The rain outside continued to fall, but inside that car, hope was beginning to bloom. Yet, the road ahead for both of them was still uncertain. This wasn't just a story of rescue, it was a story of trust, healing, and the power of compassion. But first, they had to survive this night. The dog lay curled on the blanket in the back seat, his chest rising and falling slowly as the warmth of the heater began to thaw his trembling body. The rescuer glanced at him in the rearview mirror, silently willing him to hold on just a little longer. They had called a nearby animal clinic, explaining the urgency, and the staff promised to stay open past hours to help. It was the first glimmer of hope in what had been an otherwise desperate night. When they arrived at the clinic, the rescuer carefully lifted the dog into their arms. He didn't resist. His body was limp, his trust tentative but undeniable. The vet and her assistants rushed to meet them at the door, their expressions shifting from professional focus to visible concern as they saw the state of the animal. Inside, the clinic was a flurry of activity. The dog was placed on a soft examination table, and the team began their work. They checked his vitals, cleaned his wounds, and gently removed the remnants of the rusted chain still tangled in his fur. As they worked, the rescuer stood nearby, watching anxiously, their hearts aching with every whimper the dog made. "He's dehydrated and malnourished," the vet explained gently, "but he's a fighter. With care, he can recover." Those words were a lifeline, a small but powerful promise that the worst might be behind them. The team administered fluids and medication, wrapping the dog in a soft, warm blanket. For the first time in hours, he seemed to relax, his eyes fluttering closed as exhaustion overtook him. The rescuer couldn't help but reach out, placing a gentle hand on his head. "You're safe now," they whispered. As the days passed, the clinic became the dog's sanctuary. Each day brought small victories. The first time he stood on shaky legs, the first sip of water he took without hesitation, and the first wag of his tail, a hesitant, almost unsure movement that brought tears to the rescuer's eyes. The turning point wasn't just in the dog's recovery, but in his spirit. Slowly, he began to trust again. The vet staff, who had been strangers to him at first, became his caregivers and cheerleaders, showering him with kindness and affection. He no longer flinched at a gentle touch or cowered when someone approached. One moment, in particular, stood out, a moment that symbolized the shift in his journey. It was a quiet evening, and the rescuer came to visit, as they had done every day since the rescue. They sat beside him on the floor, speaking softly, sharing words of encouragement and love. As they paused, the dog did something remarkable. He lifted his head and placed it in the rescuer's lap, letting out a long, contented sigh. It was as if he was saying, "I trust you." The room fell silent, the significance of the moment not lost on anyone present. The rescuer gently stroked his head, their voice thick with emotion. "You're so brave," they whispered. "We're going to make sure you never feel alone again." From that day forward, the dog's progress seemed unstoppable. His body grew stronger, his coat began to shine, and his eyes, once dull and filled with fear, sparkled with life. It wasn't just his physical recovery that marked the turning point. It was the transformation of his spirit. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a rebirth, a testament to resilience and the healing power of compassion. And while the journey was far from over, one thing was certain. The dog who had once been chained to a pole in the rain was now surrounded by warmth, love, and the promise of a better life. The dog's recovery wasn't just about healing his body. It was about mending his broken spirit. Days turned into weeks, and the transformation was nothing short of a miracle. The frail, trembling dog that had once been chained to a pole in the rain was now beginning to discover what it felt like to be safe, loved, and cared for. Each day brought new milestones. At first, he was hesitant, unsure of the world around him. He would glance nervously at every new face and flinch at sudden movements. But slowly, with consistent love and care, his trust began to grow. The rescuers treated him with patience, offering him small, gentle gestures that spoke louder than words: soft pats on the head, warm blankets, and bowls of fresh food. One day, something remarkable happened. As the rescuer, who had first found him, sat beside his bed, the dog took a step closer. His movements were cautious, almost as if he were testing the waters. Then, for the first time, he rested his head gently on their lap. The rescuer froze, overcome with emotion. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when the dog, after everything he had been through, decided to trust again. Tears welled up in the rescuer's eyes. "You're so brave," they whispered, running their fingers gently through his softening fur. "You're going to be okay now. I promise." The dog's eyes met theirs, and for the first time, there was a spark of hope, a glimpse of the life he could have, free from pain and fear. The days that followed were filled with joy and small victories. The dog began to wag his tail, shyly at first, but with more confidence each time. He started to explore his surroundings, sniffing the grass in the clinic's small outdoor yard, and basking in the sunlight that he had been deprived of for so long. His appetite returned, and with it, his energy. The staff couldn't help but fall in love with him. They would share stories of his progress, marveling at how quickly he was bouncing back. "He's a fighter," one of them said with a smile. "You can see it in his eyes." But the most incredible moment came during a visit from the rescuer. They had come to see him every day since that rainy night, bringing toys, treats, and endless words of encouragement. On this particular day, the dog's reaction was different. As soon as he saw them, his tail began to wag furiously. He ran up to them not cautiously, but with excitement and joy. It was as if he finally understood that this person wasn't just his rescuer, they were his friend. The bond between them was unbreakable. The rescuer knelt down, arms wide open, and the dog jumped into their embrace, his tail wagging so hard it seemed like it might never stop. "You did it," the rescuer whispered, holding him close. "You're so strong." The climax of this journey wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. The dog had gone from being abandoned and forgotten to becoming a symbol of hope and resilience. His scars, both physical and emotional, were still there, but they no longer defined him. He was no longer the dog chained to a pole in the rain. He was a survivor, a fighter, and most importantly, a beloved companion. As the dog's recovery neared its final stages, the rescuer made a decision that felt inevitable. They couldn't bear to let him go. The bond they had formed was too deep, too special. And so, on a sunny afternoon, the dog left the clinic, for the last time, not as a patient, but as a member of the rescuer's family. The drive home was filled with a sense of triumph and joy. The dog, now sitting proudly in the passenger seat, gazed out the window as if seeing the world for the first time. The rescuer glanced at him and smiled. "This is your new life," they said softly. "No more chains, no more rain, just love and happiness from now on." When they arrived home, the dog stepped out of the car and onto soft grass. He sniffed the air, his tail wagging with excitement. This was his new beginning, and he embraced it fully. The transformation was complete. The dog who had once been a symbol of suffering was now a symbol of hope. His story wasn't just about a rescue, it was about the power of compassion and the incredible resilience of animals who, despite everything, are still capable of love and trust. For the rescuer, this journey was life-changing too. They had seen firsthand how a single act of kindness could make all the difference. The bond they shared with the dog was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always light to be found. And so, their story became a testament to the fact that no life is ever too far gone, and every soul deserves a second chance. Together, they proved that love truly can heal all wounds. The dog's journey from pain to peace is a story that shows the true power of kindness. The frightened, starving dog, once chained in the rain, has now become a symbol of hope and resilience. His once sad eyes now shine with trust and joy, and his wagging tail tells a story of a heart that is healed. The bond between him and his rescuer has grown into something truly beautiful. Together, they've shown that love and patience can overcome even the darkest moments. This isn't just a story about one dog. It's a reminder that every life matters and that no one is beyond saving. For those watching, let this story inspire you to see the world differently. Whether it's offering a helping hand to a stray animal, supporting a local shelter, or simply spreading awareness, every small act of kindness makes a difference. Imagine how many lives could change if we all took a moment to care. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. By spreading stories like this, we can inspire more people to make a positive impact. Together, we can create a world where every soul, no matter how small or broken, has a chance to find love and happiness. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Let's keep spreading compassion, one story at a time.